All right, we're going to get right into it and tackle one of the biggest, most universal feelings out there. That creeping suspicion that maybe, just maybe, none of this really matters. You've asked yourself this, haven't you? Maybe on a long drive home from work, or you're just staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning. You look at your job, your to-do lists, your entire life, and this question just hits you like a ton of bricks. For a lot of us, it even has a name, the Sunday night dread. You know, that very specific, sinking feeling when the weekend is over and the weight of the week ahead just settles on your chest. It's what happens when all the distractions stop and the void seems to stare right back at you. So, why do so many of us feel this way? Well, it turns out that for centuries, Western thought has been guiding us down a very specific path. The problem is, for a lot of us, that path leads straight to a brick wall, a kind of philosophical dead end. And that wall has a name: nihilism. It's the idea that without some big cosmic plan, life is ultimately meaningless. And we're taught to be terrified of this. We treat this nothingness like it's a monster under the bed. So what do? We run from it. We buy stuff, we scroll endlessly, we distract ourselves with literally anything to avoid looking into that abyss. See, our whole way of thinking has taught us to see ourselves as these tiny, isolated little egos. It's like we're these little pilots trapped inside our own skulls, trying to shout meaning into a cold, completely silent universe. And honestly, that's terrifying. That's the meaning crisis in a nutshell. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the wall isn't a wall at all? In the early 20th century, a group of incredible Japanese thinkers called the Kyoto School walked right up to that abyss, and they saw something completely different. They saw an opportunity. And this, right here, is the great reframe, the whole game changer. The Western view looks at nothingness and sees a lack, a void, a monster to run away from. But the Kyoto School flips it entirely. They say nothingness isn't an abyss you fall into, it's a blank canvas you get to create on. It's pure, unadulterated potential. The guy behind this whole idea was Kitaro Nishida, the founder of the school. He was brilliant. He'd studied all the Western philosophers, but he also practiced Zen meditation, and he basically merged these two worlds. His core insight was this: we've mistaken emptiness for a problem, when it's actually the source of everything. Just think about a cup for a second. We spend all our time obsessing over the clay, right? The stuff of our lives, our job titles, our status, our ego. But what actually makes a cup useful? It's the empty space inside. That nothingness is what lets it hold water. Without that emptiness, a cup is just a useless lump of clay. That is the potential Nishida always talking about. Okay, so this next part is where it gets a little trippy. But I promise you, it's the most powerful piece of this entire idea. It really challenges the very foundation of who you think you are. Right now, you probably feel like there's an I inside your head, looking out at the world. You know, I am watching this. I am feeling anxious. There's you, the subject, and then there's the world, the object. Well, the Kyoto School says that this gap, this feeling of separation, is the real source of all our loneliness and anxiety. So what's the solution? You close the gap. Think about a time you were completely lost in something. Maybe you were playing an instrument or surfing a wave or even just in a really deep kiss. In that exact moment, were you thinking, I am now doing this activity? No, of course not. The I just disappears. There is only the music. There is only the wave. There is only the kiss. That is what Nishida called pure experience. And here's the beautiful part. When you let go of that desperate need to be a separate self, you don't vanish. You actually expand. You realize you were never just a single fragile drop of water separate from everything else. You are, and you always have been, the entire ocean experiencing itself. So what does this all mean? How does all this heady philosophy actually help you with that Sunday night dread? Okay, let's bring it back down to earth and see how this one mindset shift changes absolutely everything. It all comes down to a choice. Both ways of thinking can start from the exact same place. Okay, maybe nothing matters. The nihilist path takes this to mean, so why even bother? And that leads straight to despair. But the Kyoto School path says, nothing matters, and therefore you are completely and totally free. And that leads to liberation. So that anxiety, that dread you feel, it isn't proof that life is meaningless. It's just friction. It's the exhausting effort of trying to build up and defend the separate I, an ego that isn't even really there to begin with. The struggle itself is the problem, not the emptiness. We spend our whole lives trying so hard to be something, to be important, to leave a mark, to build this solid self. And man, it is exhausting. But what if the greatest strength you could ever have comes from allowing yourself to be nothing? So, the next time you feel that void, that Sunday night dread creeping in, what would happen if, just this once, instead of running from it, you turned around and finally let it in?
Subscribe for daily wisdom.